Hey, Jan. You are muted still, but I can lip read enough to know that you asked me, how are you? That one's your video. For some reason, it's putting people in a waiting room, even though I did not designate for it to do that. Linda, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Great. Jan, it looks like you are now too.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good.
Are we the early birds?
Yes, thank you for being early. Great to see your lovely faces.
And yours. How are you?
You know, kindergarten on Zoom. My 2-year-old's thrilled with life. My 5-year-old's like, we're our friends.
Uh-huh.
I am going to go into Zoom real quick and see if I can get rid of this waiting room nonsense, because we shouldn't have a waiting room.
I hate a waiting room. I hate it. It's so
No.
annoying because you have to let everybody in.
Yeah, and I designated that this would not have a waiting room, so I'm frustrated that it's doing that. It might have reset settings.
Yeah, it's what it starts to say. Sometimes Zoom keeps resetting different things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't let me edit now that we have started the meeting, but I will be sure to admit everybody who is in the waiting room. Hello, all. I see Joel, Alita, George, Nikki, Bruce Butler, and some attendees from the public. I don't want to butcher your name because sometimes people use other people's laptops, so I will not assume. Hi, Carol. Hi, Zan.
Lord.
Let's see, Barbara.
George, what kind of little dog is that back there?
That's just Randy. He's just a little dog. He's a mutt. He's dachshund and something else. He looks like some terrier kind of
He
thing.
looked like a little chihuahua.
You know, he's a pain in the butt. That's what he is.
I just heard that there was this family in Santa Barbara that they had 100 chihuahuas in their house. They got busted for that.
Well, I thought there was a punchline coming.
No, this is like life.
I thought you were going to say it's the equivalent of 10 children.
I just was listening to NPR and I heard a lady going on about the hungry caterpillar, and they've changed it to the angry mom who's been quarantined with the kids, and they had to bleep out lots of things about what mom was up to, how it was going for mom.
The only thing I'll change about that is make it parent, because my husband is the stay-at-home parent. And he hates that they're all called mom memes. He's like, these should be parent memes. The person who is home with the children memes.
What's Bruce Weber doing here? Bruce, this is a private meeting.
Carol, Carol, you and I and Jim Moorfield can't have a meeting without Bruce.
I haven't seen Bruce in eons. That's cool.
Just for people who don't know Carol's wonderful sarcastic humor, she is joking, and these meetings are open to the public, and anyone can attend.
But not Bruce.
Yeah, but not Bruce.
So,
What's your name,
Julie,
Julie?
I have something
This
I
is
want to
Julie.
Oh, cute.
This is our dog, Julie.
Oh, you're kidding me, Jan. How dare you? But I'm kidding.
No, this is Julie.
Julie
Well, at
Square.
least she's cute.
Okay.
So the other Julie, the other one, the talking Julie. So I want to say something. Can I?
Yes, go ahead, Carol, and then I'll start the meeting.
Well, I wanted to thank you for pulling together all this. I've been really pleased and impressed with how you pulled all this stuff together. It's been all these disparate conversations, all of us mad as hatters half the time. And you really pulled it together into a really logical sequence that we can follow what other people are doing and actually talk to other people. And I think that's a hard job to do. And thank you very much for doing it.
Well, thank you, Carol.
You're
no
welcome.
no one does it alone. You guys all did it as well.
Oh,
Um,
you know, that's just like foolish talk. I mean, that's what people always say. Oh, I couldn't have done it without my team. But the truth is, you did a lot of it yourself. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that's why the city and the county hired this position, because you need a dedicated staff member to bring everybody together if they are all also working full-time elsewhere. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting and welcome everyone. I see most of us here. I'm going to check with our note taker, Paula. Paula, can you confirm you can hear?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Hey, Paula, looking
Yeah,
good.
and we are recording, so mind your tongues. I'm kidding.
Mm-mm.
Never. And I'm going to go ahead and screen share to get the meeting going. Give me just a second, please. We will start this. Hold on, I'm going to put it into slideshow mode. All right. Well, it's not doing what I wanted to do. So give me just a second. All apologies. Okay, you should be able to see my slideshow at this point. Okay, great. Thank you for nodding, Carol. Welcome. We're officially going to start the October meeting for the Hope Board. I see some members of the public on today. So just some Zoom housekeeping. You're going to be muted and you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to make a public comment. If you want to share your video, you can click on Start Video. And there will be time allotted after I go over the meeting agenda for public comment. So to do a public comment, you're going to type into the chat area saying that you would like to make a public comment. So far, I'm just seeing cute dog chats from the board. So I'll do a little meeting overview, our agreements and culture. We'll have the public comment. You all will vote to approve the minutes. We'll take roll. There's a couple logistical updates. And then I'm going to go ahead and present the priority areas that came out of all the research and data that the work groups looked at. And you as a board can discuss and vote to adopt the priority areas. And then we'll talk about community engagement going into November and December. And then at the end, we will have some updates about what's going on in our community that will include what's happening with camping in Corvallis. So for those of you who want to make a public comment, I'll give you one more minute to type into the chat. Please do your name and the topic you would like to comment on. And as always, if you don't want to speak now, you can email me your comments right after I go over the meeting overview. So here's the agreements for the culture and conduct. Just making sure to reiterate these at the beginning of every meeting because lots of us are very passionate about this topic. So let's be inclusive and kind and respectful and open-minded as we have these discussions. Where are we now? I left off December and January because we were just getting going. Our third meeting in February, we broke into the work groups. We had a major delay with COVID response, reconvened in June. In July, the data group presented. In August, the model systems group presented. In September, our current system with all of its gaps was presented. And now here we are in October, and we're going to prioritize 3 to 4 areas based on our bylaws guidance. And going into November and December, do community engagement to get feedback on those. And the goal is to come up with policy recommendations on our topic areas that incorporates that community feedback and to try to get it to city and county governments as they go into their budget talks in March. All right, I'm going to check the chat and see if we have anyone who wants to make a public comment. I'm also going to look at our participants and see if we have anyone who has called in on the phone. I do see one caller on the phone. Caller on the phone, if you would like to unmute yourself, if you want to make a public comment, please go ahead and do so now. And Andrew Giles, I see you've joined us. I apologize if you were in a waiting room. For some reason, this meeting defaulted to having a waiting room and it should not have, and I'll be sure to check that again in the future before I start. Okay, seeing no chats about public comment, I'm going to assume that no one wants to make a public comment and we will move on. So some logistics, we'll approve our minutes. I'm going to remind everybody that Dr. Aguilar is here in attendance today to act as an equity advocate and model this role for the board. And if she hears things or wants to add something to the discussion from an equity advocate perspective, I have told her to please unmute herself and to chime in because that's what she's been a part of why she's been hired to join this group. And then a scheduling reminder that our November and December meetings are 1 week earlier. I want to make that very clear for the board members and for the public. It's been updated on the county calendar. It's been updated on the H.O.P.E website. But even just this morning, I heard someone say the old dates. So I want to make sure we have the correct dates. So let's start with voting to approve the minutes. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to take roll as well. So as I say your name, please go ahead and unmute yourself. First, we need a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last month's meeting.
Make a motion.
Andrea
Second.
Myrie, thank you.
Second.
Who was that who seconded? Anita Earl, thank you. Okay, Flip Anderson.
Present, and I approve the minute. I mean, whatever that word was, sorry.
Thank you. Lennox Archer.
Present, and I vote aye.
Thank you. Zan Ogerow.
Present, aye.
Thank you. Catherine Bisco. I don't see her on my screen, so I don't think she is here yet. Hopefully she can join. Carol Butcher.
Present, yes.
Bruce Butler.
Present and I.
Thank you. Brian Cotter. I am not seeing Brian on my screens, so hopefully he can join us soon. Anita Earl.
Present, aye.
Joel Goodwin.
Present and aye.
George Grosh.
Present and I.
Barbara Hanley.
Present and aye.
Alita Hess Holcomb. I can see you, Alita, but I can't hear you. Want to give me a thumbs up if you're an aye? Okay, Alita is indicating a thumbs up and voting aye for the minutes. Nikki Hobbs.
Present and I.
Thank you. Christina Jansilla. I'm not seeing Christina on my screen, but there is one caller. Okay, hopefully Christina can join us. Charles Mon. I also don't see Charles. Hopefully he can join us. Peggy McGuire.
Present and yes.
Thank you. Jim Moorfield. I believe Jim will not be here today. He had a pre-planned absence that he told us about. I do not see him here today, so that is confirmed. Jim has an excused absence. Andrea Myrie.
Here and yes.
Jan Napak.
Present and yes.
Reese Stotzenberg.
Present and yes.
Linda Tucker.
Present, yes.
I'm getting a text from Christina that she is on the phone. She is present. Yes and yes. Christina, are you able to unmute yourself? If not, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you right now. And we're going to try this. So hopefully you're not actively chewing or anything. I'm going to unmute you now. Christina, are you able to talk? Yeah, it's not working. I apologize, but I have sent you an unmute message. But we can record Christina as being in attendance and voting yes on the minutes. She has texted me in writing as such. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and screen share again. I would like your feedback on how to communicate events and webinars and articles to you. How often do you as a board want me to share these? The reason being is probably every day I get an email from someone saying, share this with the Hope Advisory Board. And a lot of it is very important. And I want to ask you all what you think would work. If you want a once monthly update, every other week, once a week in the beginning of the week. There are so many events and articles that are very important. Do you have thoughts about this so I do not overwhelm you via email?
I think if
What's
there's
an
something that needs
example?
to,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Joel.
if there's something that needs to be addressed in a timely fashion, webinar or something like that, that's appropriate based on the need. But I think hopefully I'm speaking for everybody else that, you know, if there's some sort of regular compilation rather than, you know, 6 new emails a day, I think everybody would probably appreciate that, whether that's every other week or once a month, whatever works.
Okay, Carol and then George.
I just wanted to, well, I think Joel said it. What would be an example of something just to get an idea of sort of the mundane to the important?
Sure. I got one today about the Oregon Health Forum having a supportive conversation about homeless youth on Thursday, November 12th. They're working on an agenda and obviously stopping homelessness while someone is a youth before they become an adult is seen as a very important issue. There's lots of conferences that are happening. There's webinars on equity and racial justice. Many of these topics are very important to this work, so I don't want to parse levels of importance based on
Yeah.
topic.
Okay.
George?
You want to consider maybe just sending us an email at your convenience as you think it comes up, but then put everything on the website, and you can just direct us to the website and say, I've got a number of things around these topics. Feel free to go take a look at them.
Jan? I can't hear you, Jan.
A
There you go.
weekly digest, a bi-weekly digest, much like the city does. Can you get your admin to do that?
I think I'll probably do it personally. That's part of my role to make sure I filter information that goes to you all. But it sounds like what I'm hearing, if there's something really timely, like I get it and it's tomorrow, I'll go ahead and shoot it out as it comes. But for the most part, probably every other week, maybe twice monthly. I'm seeing nodding heads from Zan, Lennox, Barbara, Andrea, George, Alita. Okay, thank you for the feedback. I will go ahead and do that. All right, I'm seeing something in the chat too. Peggy's fine with any number of emails with information that I care to forward, and she can choose when I decide to read them. Yeah, I'll be sure to send out timely ones. So if it's something that's upcoming and I know I'm not going to be able to send it before the next bi-monthly update, I'll go ahead and share it with you all, and you can delete at will. All right, going back to the PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and present the work group priority areas that you all discussed. It was the consensus of most of your work groups that you were comfortable with me doing that since you had the pre-discussion. And then you can discuss them and vote to adopt them or tweak them. And then we'll talk about community engagement choices and planning and updates. So just to reiterate why we are doing this and how our bylaws are driving it with data, a systems level approach involving the community, prioritizing vulnerable populations, promoting safety, and promoting racial and ethnic justice. That is where all of these different work group goals came from. We started out with this in February and again in June, and it really has evolved based on your research. The data that was collected shows pretty staggering disparities by race and ethnicity. The data group put this all together to also look at numbers of people who are affected, and it is tending towards our emergency and crisis response end of the spectrum. And so the priority topics that came from our work group on data fall under these two main categories, mainly because that's where most of our data is. And aligning and bolstering crisis response resources was the main topic, but it's really sort of two parts. And one part of that is services, and one part of that is location. And that work group saw this in terms of short-term and long-term ways of looking at this topic. And then the second main priority area would be transitional options. I listed some examples there. And I'll circle back to this too. The August meeting looked at model systems of service delivery and shelter, and they looked at recommended models, successful models, and really presented a new way of looking at our system where we align our crisis response resources. And in red are the absolute important areas from a nationally recommended model. And this is another way to look at that with bigger font and in maybe easier to read context. And this was presented at the August meeting. The conclusions from that work group were aligning crisis response, coordinated entry and care coordination, and permanent supportive housing. And really the conclusions from those recommended models tied directly into that work group's priority areas based on the research that they did. So the model systems work group in their pre-discussion on this topic said our top areas would be operational changes for improved care coordination. And that ties very closely in with aligning of crisis response resources. That's almost another way to say the same thing, and really has to do with care coordination, but some other things tied in there as well. Transitional options for safety, health, and stability. This group really wanted to put the reasons for transitional options within that title of that topic, and having to do with safety, health, and stability. And then the third one being permanent supportive housing units. I will come back to these after I present the next one. The last work group that presented at your last meeting has to do with our current housing and services spectrum. And they presented separately on Corvallis resources and all Benton County resources. And this was presented, Carol, I think I can hear you, so I'm going to go ahead and mute you. This was presented over the course of a whole hour. So for individuals listening to this call who could not make it to last month's meeting, please go to the HOPE website if you would like more detail about all of these different resources and gaps and the efforts to address those gaps. We looked at rural, where in this all services outside of Corvallis, you can see that there is no emergency shelter and there is no resource center and there is no crisis response for behavioral health concerns. There's no permanent supportive housing. There are quite a bit, there are many food banks, and that's one of the resources in the rest of Benton County. So they articulated all the gaps and the efforts to address those gaps. So the work group on our current system and the gaps in our current system came up with their 3 priority areas based on the data and the research from their work group. And it's quite consistent with the other work groups. Align and strengthen our crisis response resources with some short-term and some long-term goals. In the short term, elevate and adopt a community-wide hub care coordination model. And this is something that the Daytime Drop-In Center is doing in practice. And it's something that Captain Goodwin looked at on a bigger scale for safety reasons. And in the short term, having a safe place for people to sleep while we work toward long-term goals. And then the long term, really having a resource center with emergency shelter beds co-located. Transitional shelter options and permanent supportive housing. So I went ahead and looked at what you all looked at in your work groups. Oh, good. Charles is joining us now. Charles, welcome to the party. I just reviewed what the work groups had done in some pre-discussion, and this is how it shakes out as far as aligning and strengthening crisis response resources. That's sort of two topics. One is strengthening the resources, and another one is aligning and having operational changes to improve care coordination, transitional options, and permanent supportive housing. So this is where the priority topic areas have come out of your pre-discussion and out of your research and your data. And really this first one having two parts, alignment of services, making changes to improve care coordination, having a location, a safe place to be. Third, transitional options. And fourth, permanent supportive housing units. I'm going to give the board a second to read this. And then I wanted to go through it and have you all discuss it topic by topic. And then if we want to make tweaks or make a motion to adopt them as is, let's open it up for discussion on these priority topics 1 and 2. This is aligning and strengthening crisis response resources.
Can I jump in, Julie?
Absolutely.
I think this definitely captures what we wanted to say, but it also isn't quite as specific as it might be in terms of saying some of what we mean. And I guess it's captured in the second part in location, a safe place to be during sleeping and waking hours for individuals without housing. But that could be unpacked a little bit more to indicate that we want that for men, for women, for folks that are LGBTQ, for families with children, couples, because we have some elements of that safe place to be, but we have some really significant gaps depending on what, whether you fit in the shape of the hole that PEG's designed for, and not all pegs are the same.
All right, so I think a modification under location, a safe place to be during sleeping and waking hours for individuals without housing, comma, for all populations. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from you.
I have a couple of questions when you have a minute.
Yes, and I'm going to go, would you like me to stop sharing so you all can see each other, or would you prefer to see this language up on the screen?
I think I'd like to keep it up on the screen. I don't know how others feel.
I like the screen. This is Jan.
Okay. Okay, George, go
I'd
ahead.
like whoever speaks to say who they are so we know who's talking. If I can't see them, I don't necessarily recognize a voice.
Okay, yeah.
I believe
George.
it pops up on your screen. It pops up on my screen when somebody talks. So, or highlights the photo here. My comment was I concur with Zan on that. If we were to take number 1 out to the public and say what we're proposing, my question would be for that coordination between existing providers. What does that actually say? What does that look like? What are we actually proposing to do there that's new or different? Same with the data collection. Increased case management to support. That's something we can do. That's clear, and it gives you something. The hub model is more specific. The data tracking specific, but that coordination between providers doesn't, to me, really say anything other than keep talking to one another. And it seems like we do a lot of. How would that be different than what we're doing already?
Well, and I think, George, these are topics, and that is what the community engagement is for. So in November and December, we flesh these out and we ask service providers, what would it mean to make operational changes to improve care coordination? What would it mean to elevate this and adopt this? Does that mean more FTEs? Does that mean investment in more case managers? And so I think instead of us coming up with the details under this topic, I think we say that this is a priority topic area based on our data and what our system needs. And then we ask the community, how do we get there?
Then I can agree with that. Then the next question that I would have related to that, if we say that's our priority, then the next step for us after that would be to sit down and define it better, correct? Before we issue something final.
Absolutely. And that would be part of incorporating public feedback into the policy recommendations in January and February. And I want to make sure to read something from the chat. And then Jan, I think you want to talk. Barbara and Nikki in the chat are saying a recommendation for the wording under location, a safe place to be during sleeping and waking hours for individuals without housing that respects and addresses the safety needs of each individual.
I kind of feel like it's a little redundant because it is a safe place. So adding on safety needs is kind of like, well, we've already said that.
So perhaps safe place to be during sleeping waking hours for individuals, or how about for all populations instead of individuals, for all populations without housing that respects and addresses the needs of each individual.
Zan here. I like that alternative, Julie.
Okay, safe place to be during sleeping and waking hours.
Reese here, I had a question.
Go for it, Reese.
Does it need to be as specific to say during sleeping and waking hours? I know a lot of other towns have it set up that way, but the problem, it creates this thing where everyone has to move out in the morning into the town and then come back in the evening because a lot of places are set up to only allow people overnight, whereas ideally it would be somewhere safe for them to be all the time.
This is Peggy. I just wanted to say that I feel like it needs to be called out because I think about in terms of we need places like the daytime drop-in center for people to be. And one of the things that we find in dealing with our funders is that they're willing to provide resources for sleeping places, but not a place to be in the daytime. And so I like the fact that we call it out.
I am making modifications right now. Please continue to discuss.
Well, just a question for Reese. Reese, if what you're suggesting is instead of saying sleeping and waking hours, if there's a place where somebody could be at all times, isn't that called housing? That's like where you live, isn't it?
Isn't waking hours just when you're awake? Like sleeping hours is when you're asleep and waking hours is when you're awake. Like maybe we could clarify the language, but like that's what it means.
I think it's very clear.
And on number 2, I'm just curious, do we need to specify for people who are currently homeless? I mean, really what we want is for everybody to have that safe place, right?
Is that in a different
It's changed already.
what I was wondering, because if we're looking at housing stability as the the umbrella for this, but we're looking at this from a crisis on the ground kind of a thing. Is that what am I misinterpreting that?
Well, I think the reason the populations without housing is in there is because this is under the priority topic of crisis response resources. So it really is for individuals without housing. There needs to be a safe place. And perhaps, well, I'll be quiet. I'll let the rest of you talk.
Oh, can I say something? I know that when we align services, we need to, it says operational changes. for improved care coordination. So I think assignments, if you look at this from whose job, who is doing what job, and that's their job. So they're assigned for that. And it could be, that could be the business might have or public or private individuals might have a say in this, religious organizations, public officials, corrections, they all have a job to do. And when you say operational changes, I was wondering, maybe you need organizational changes or organizational overview, or a bigger umbrella, or is those operational changes cover that? What I'm trying to get across here. It's not just providers, but we're talking about the state, and we're talking about the county, and we're talking about the city, and COC, advocates, organizations, people in the community.
Zan is chatting system-wide operational changes.
Okay. Thank you. That'll
All
work.
right. One more comment on the sleeping hours. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please, Race. Thanks.
A large, maybe not the majority, but certainly a large percentage of the homeless population don't sleep during traditional hours. A lot of, especially people who would collect cans would sleep during the day and collect at night. And so we're excluding a large faction if we only have it during traditional nighttime, hours. And so I would move to change the wording to all hours, a safe place to sleep or be during all hours. It could just be a outdoor area, but currently they have to essentially borderline break the law to sleep.
What about a safe place to be 24/7 for all populations without housing that respects and addresses the needs of the individual?
Yeah, and I think maybe one way we can address, because I hear what Peggy's saying about funders differentiating between overnight shelter and drop-in centers, is maybe we can shake that out and the bullet points underneath that. Those are options for locations. I'm not sure.
So for sleeping and I want to say existing, but that just sounds horrible. Just a safe place for people to be for sleeping and non-sleeping.
I don't think we should. Julie?
Go ahead, Carol.
Well, to a degree, this is aspirational. And I think that the more detail we get, the less aspirational it gets. And to worry about, I get the funding part, but I don't think this is a place to be worrying about it. I think if I think about this going out to the people I know who are caring about housing, they want everybody to have a safe place 24 hours a day. And that's the bottom line there. And any kind of deviation from that just feels like a compromise. And I don't think that's, if it's going to get compromised, let the city and county compromise it, but not us.
Yeah, this is Bruce. I agree with that. I think safe place to be 24/7. What more needs to be said? Whether people are sleeping or not sleeping, or obviously they can't be doing things that are disruptive or illegal, but let's just take that as a given and leave it at that.
All right. Any other tweaks to safe place to be 24/7 for all populations without housing that respects and addresses the needs of each individual? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy that and move it a little farther down to make sure we get the right language. Okay, moving on to priority topic 3. Transitional options, health and stability. And the examples would be micro shelters, managed camping, Conestoga huts, RV and car camping, in locations that are staffed, safe, stable, and provide services. And obviously our community engagement will be to ask the community what other successful models they have seen that they would like to adopt or support here, what kind of notification they would want when that happens, and other feedback on these topics. But how do you feel about this language? Jan?
No, I think it looks good. I'm trying to think what the response would be in terms of because it's going to cost money.
All of this costs money, Jan, and that's why we're giving these recommendations to the city and the county before they make their budget decisions. I kid. I don't mean to be glib. Any feedback on this wording?
I would move, go ahead. I would just move the Conestoga huts, switch it with managed camping because micro shelters and Conestoga huts are very similar.
Okay, so micro shelters / Conestoga huts. Reese is saying yes. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
Oops, sorry. Skip this.
I think what the community needs to be aware of, though, is that even though we have these great ideas and options and parking and RV and everything, they have to realize that you can't put them just anywhere. I mean, people need to be thinking of that. They'd also need to be thinking of location. They also need to be thinking that this is everyone in the community needs to be involved in this. So when you say transitional options, I'm trying to think of a way to make sure that the people know that these transitional options are realistic and actionable.
Although I would push back on that a little bit, Jan, and say that it seems like right now, very few are actionable. So I would actually leave it open to more interpretation by the community. I feel like that's the way we can move forward on some of these things, because there's literally it's really hard to place any of these right now.
I just didn't want people to get, all fired up about doing something and then they find out that they can't do it. So that's where I'm coming from on that.
Yeah, and I think the way things currently are with city and county code, that might be true. And I think that's part of this board's purpose and part of the community feedback. If there is a lot of community feedback that a micro shelter village or a managed camp or that another RV location is something people have seen be successful elsewhere and want to support adoption of it here, then part of the policy recommendations to the city and the county are to make changes to allow for this because transitional options is a priority. And so I think that's where it gets tied in.
Okay.
Question about the wording that says and provide services for health. Can we flesh that out a little bit? I mean, do you mean nurses on board or do you mean porta potties?
I think that should come out in the community feedback as far as what evidence-based practices people have seen, what works, what the data shows is supportive. Obviously, sanitation like porta potties is sort of a bare minimum. I think services like health speaks more to behavioral health and physical health care, like the Samaritan van or visits from an LCSW. But we can get more nitty gritty here, or we can see what the community feedback says.
Can we throw in the word hygiene, perhaps? Services for health and hygiene.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that from Andrea Myrie as well. Nikki's saying sanitary. Okay, so how about we say provide services for hygiene and health? I think hygiene encompasses the sanitary comment.
This is Charles. I just wanted to chime in. I actually kind of like that it just says services for health, because I feel that's such a wide topic, and that's kind of where we want to be. You know, health could mean physical health, it could be sanitation, it could be mental health, it could be, you know, working to provide services for drug addiction or you know, alcohol problems. And I think I personally like that it's more vague. I don't have a problem with adding sanitation, the word sanitation in there. I just don't want people to think that we're only talking about sanitation and not everything else.
So if we do health and hygiene, we've kind of covered it though. And again, to me, I'm thinking about how the community is going to, you know, react to this. And the more we can, if we don't put hygiene in there, we're going to spend a lot of community time talking about hygiene. So we might as well just put it in now, is my opinion.
Safe is kind of covering hygiene as well, because if it doesn't have hygiene, then it's not safe. So
no, I don't think that's true, Alina. I think that's true to you, but the people like I talk with, I don't talk with the people you talk with that are really in depth and work with the homeless. I talk to more general people, and to them, safe would be safe in terms of safety, and the hygiene would be a separate piece. Now, I mean, I think in terms of reality, you're correct. But again, I'm looking at, we're going out, we're talking to people. The more we can nail down some of this stuff so we don't spend a lot of time doing what we're doing right now, that would be good, because wordsmithing is not the operative issue here. The issue is, can we get some agreement on what we're trying to do and get some policy changes to make it happen? So I still vote for hygiene.
Okay, yeah, I think there's consensus in the chat among the members for hygiene and health. One thing I want to say from the chat, and Ben Danley from Community Outreach, I'm so glad you were here today, because the only data that we had from a transitional option was really COI. We had some data from Corvallis Housing First too, but COI's data was robust, and COI and Corvallis Housing First are our two main transitional options here in Corvallis. And I think it would be important to include them and list them. You know, we can say our current or our existing examples would be Community Outreach and Corvallis Housing First. Other examples would include these. How do you feel about that?
This is Nikki, and I think that's a good idea, what you just suggested, Julie. So then that's a little bit, you know, like what Carol was saying, if we're going to be talking to a lot of different people, if they're familiar with any of those, it kind of gives them a jumping off point to understand. And then I also wanted to add about the sanitation. I guess what I meant was putting it with the part where it says staffed, safe, sanitary, stable. I know it's just a lot of S words in a row, but that's sort of what I meant, because I can see how people would be confused with safety, thinking more like crime or violence, versus sanitary as in it needs to have, you know, running water, clean water, and bathrooms and things like that. So that's also just something I want to throw out for the group. They wanted that.
Yeah, because I guess hygiene and sanitation aren't really services as much as just on-site amenities that are staffed, safe, sanitary, stable, and provide services for health.
Good.
Here.
Yep.
Go ahead, Carol. I was going to recommend removing the word staffed. Not only is it a little misleading, it kind of repeats. So managed camping, RV and car camping in locations that are, you could say managed, but it's misleading because they're not going to necessarily be staffed. I think that you can remove the word altogether personally and just start with safe.
Well, and some of the different evidence-based practices, they have individuals who live there who are called camp posts, and they are people who live there and who are in a stable enough place in their life that they act as part of that on-site presence, but they aren't paid staff members. So I'm comfortable removing that if the rest of the board is.
Yeah, I agree. I think staff doesn't need to be in there. Managed camping says it all.
Yeah, I have a quick comment. Also, you're saying provide services for health. I was just wondering, that you're facilitating services for health. If somebody wants to go to a clinic or something, they don't have to have a clinic there. But there are things that are related to these places, such as a cooking area. So maybe if you just said related services, or as opposed to, saying specific, like a specific, providing a specific service of health, but providing related services such as kitchens and gardening areas. I don't know what.
Well, and I think those details can get fleshed out and are really location dependent. I
Okay.
think the modifying words of safety, sanitation, stability, and services for health and whatever health that ends up being. I think as far as a topic goes, to start us off with community feedback. And again, this is not where our work ends. This is where it begins. So this is a topic to get community feedback, and these are not set in stone. And they're going to get fleshed out by the community feedback we received as far as what does need to be there, what other successful practices have we seen elsewhere that we'd like to adopt here, and what do they include?
Julie, I was going to exactly say what you brought up, that this is really just something to throw out, in my opinion, to start the ideas percolating, because we may very well get feedback about other options that people have seen that work well elsewhere. And as Jen has said, there are going to be location specific issues that, one place may have a place for a kitchen, another place doesn't, whatever. I just feel like, spending a lot of time wordsmithing this isn't necessarily that important.
Thanks for the feedback, Piggy.
Right. I had a comment as well.
Go ahead, George.
I agree with what Peggy just said. And I think when we think about what we're taking to the public, we should be taking a specific set of things to the public, because what they're looking to for us is they're looking to us for leadership around what are the things that we can ask providers, the city and the county to do that can address the problems that they know that exist in the community related to unhoused people and the problems that arise from that. And so they're not going to be concerned about what this happens. They want to know, what are we proposing for solutions? So we should be as solution-based as we can be. And we also have to remember that when we talk about safe to us and providers, people in this room, in this chat, mean one thing. It means something else to the community. In our world, in the provider world, the world of people sitting here, safe means it's a place that's safe for the people that are there and utilizing the services. For the community, safe means their safety. And their well-being. And so those are two different things, and we need to think about how we approach those. And we also need to think about, if we're going to the community and we're asking them for what they think solutions are, we're not going to get solutions. What we're going to get are solutions that they're willing to accept, not necessarily solutions that will effectively address the problem. And that's why we need to be able to say to them, we know that having a range of services with all of the things that are listed here, that we've listed these priorities, we know from data that we've seen in other places that these are the types of things that help to address the kinds of concerns that the community has. And so we should be focusing on those things.
Thanks, George. I'm going to highlight one other thing that Reese said that other people are agreeing with, and I'm sorry about the omission. Current examples in Corvallis are COI, Corvallis Housing First, and Safe Place, which includes Safe Camp and the micro shelters that are currently at other locations.
I have a question for clarification, if I might.
Go for it, Joel.
Are we coming up with these topics as something we're going to take to the community and ask for input as topics of discussion? Or are we saying that this is kind of maybe more what George was talking about? This is what we're proposing, kind of thing.
Well, I think the topics are not up for discussion. So the data and the systems research you guys have done say that these topics are what we are going to move forward with. And so the community feedback can help shape the details under these topics that get included in the policy recommendations.
So we're basically saying that as a group, we all agree on all of these things.
That we agree that transitional options for safety, health, and stability are a priority that need to have a policy recommendation. And what is it that we're going to recommend?
I was going to say, this is a strategy. We don't have to have, we're better at finding the means to the end. But everybody in the community needs to weigh in on whether or not this is something that they can support. I don't think that we can hand out a solution and then they vote on it. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure the dynamic here, but the Hope Charter is, looking at stakeholders and getting input from stakeholders. So on any of our activities. So it's a kind of a fine line there.
But the process is we develop what we think are some very good solutions based on the data. We don't know if we have holes in the data. We don't know how the community reacts. So we go out to the community, and some people are just going to go, There's some people who are very involved in housing, and they're going to say, well, what about this? What about that? So that gets incorporated. But to me, that's still the data gathering part. We're just gathering it from the community. But the harder sell is when it goes to city and to the city and the county, and we say, we've looked at examples, we have community input, and here's what we got to do. And so I think that here's where we got to do part is when it goes to city and county, not when it goes to the community. And this is Corvallis, and you don't go to Corvallis and say this is a solution. And I mean, you might want to, but it doesn't work that way. So you got to go to Corvallis but I think we've got a really solid because we've got data here, we can back up everything we've said. And so it's just, my understanding is, did we miss something? And is there enough support for this? And then as I say, then when we, the royal we, go to the city and the county, that's where we say these are the solutions based on everything we know. That's my firm opinion, and I'm sticking with it.
And Zan is agreeing with you with respect to process here.
It's in my heart.
And also, it is bigger than Corvallis. It's all Benton County. And so when we do community feedback with Amigos de Monroe and Casa Latinos Unidos, what those providers and the clients that they serve say would be a successful transitional option for those families might be different feedback than what we get from other individuals experiencing homelessness here in Corvallis. So that's where the community feedback is going to shape our recommendations to the city and the county based on what we hear people would like to see as more transitional options. Did that answer your question, Joel? Did you have more to say on that?
I guess to clarify, is the goal here that me as somebody that's involved with this committee, I'm certainly not debating the need for transitional options at all. But now we're getting into the weeds in terms of what specific options are there. So I guess my question is, are we as members of the committee being asked to say, yes, I support each and every single one of these options, or just here we support this concept, here are some ideas that we want community feedback about?
The latter. Yeah, we know that we need transitional options for safety, health, and stability. Currently, here's what we have. Other examples of transitional options are this. Let's get community feedback on how we expand transitional options here.
Okay, thank you.
In order to address that, Julie, I think that as you just said, you have current examples are, and we should say additional examples include.
All right.
Because we could have, ideally, we'd be great to have more Corvallis Housing First and type sites, right? But that's the most expensive, or COI.
All right. Are there any other tweaks to this language, or does the board feel comfortable with it?
I think as long as we're looking at this as a concept like you, I think we're good. I'm good.
Okay. Let's see, additional examples may include from Barbara. I think just additional examples include some of these, I think is fine as far as syntax goes. I want to address one public comment from Lori. Is feedback going to include Monroe, Adair, and small communities? Yes, it will, Lori, and I'm going to go over our public engagement strategies and where we are going to be doing outreach, and I have already included those other areas of Benton County. Right.
Should we say include additional micro shelters in Conestoga, since we already have some, and we already have some managed camping, even though it's not specifically for individuals experiencing homelessness, but at the fairgrounds, we have managed camping for the public. And I might be getting into the details too much.
I think that's legit. I think you could just say examples include.
So take out additional or leave it in?
I would just say examples include.
Okay, I don't think we need to do much more wordsmithing. I think we are broad enough here. I'm going to copy.
It would
and
actually be
paste.
additional examples instead of just, because you have current examples and then examples. That doesn't make sense. It should be current and then additional.
The only
Thank
problem
you,
is
linguistics.
the only problem with that is that some of the examples on the first point are managed camping and some of those other things, but we don't have a, anyway.
I want to defer to Lennox because you have a degree in linguistics. So what do you think, Lennox? You're the final word.
I don't want to be the final word, but like I said, I think it makes more sense with current and then additional. But I don't want to be the final word.
I agree.
Right, you are.
Makes more sense with additional.
All right. I mean, I think for people who know Safe Camp, they know that it is managed camping. And they know that micro shelters are included too. It's sort of a hybrid. Andrea, are you okay with it? Okay.
I'm not going to argue with someone with a degree in linguistics.
Me either.
I think back to your safe camp piece, I think that somebody else indicated that safe place is more appropriate because that includes safe camp.
Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, because safe place would be the managed camping at Safe Camp and also dispersed micro shelters throughout the community. Thank you for that catch.
We could say this would get around the linguistic challenges. We could say current providers are COI, Corvallis Housing First and Safe Place. I don't know.
Sure.
Current
providers.
Yeah, were you going to there was Zan had made a suggestion to put in systematic change. This is the prior slide.
Mm-hmm.
Systematic operational changes.
System-wide.
System-wide. Was that something we agreed on?
Well, I think operational changes can be within an organization. They can be system-wide. I think it encompasses both. So we have coordination between existing providers, increased case management, the hub model of care coordination.
Yeah, I wanted to make a distinction that we've got state services that we have to align and religious organizations, private sector, businesses.
I think keeping it broad when we're talking about topics and getting down into the weeds with policy recommendations is probably where we should stay at this point.
Get this slide off and move on. This is getting to be too.
Okay.
It's going to happen. We're already going to go through this with the public. We don't need to do it anymore. But hey, what do I know?
All right.
Okay, priority topic 3. I think we are all comfortable with the language on the transitional options.
Now that we did the current providers, I think we should change from additional to something like potential examples. Include additional micro shelters or increased micro shelters. Put potential
They're
Or,
not potential, they're already happening.
well, but we're proposing new transitional options.
So Reese, I'm just gonna reiterate, this is all of Benton County. So micro shelters don't exist anywhere outside of Corvallis. So when we are doing outreach for Monroe and Philomath and other
Right.
areas, it's an additional example they haven't seen before.
I get that, but I don't know, well, I mean, this is making me nuts, so I'll have to. Potential, additional, I have a history degree, I don't have a linguistics.
Just move on.
Move on.
All right, priority topic 4, permanent supportive housing units. Keeping at the forefront diversity, equity, and inclusion to prioritize racial and ethnic justice. Obviously, that is throughout this, but that was a bullet point, particularly for permanent supportive housing units that came from one of the work groups.
I think it should be keep and not keeping.
Thank you, Lennox. Any other tweaks to this language?
Does that cover LBGQ? It does cover, it looks like it's more about racial diversity, but not trans or anything else.
It is.
Am I reading it too narrowly?
No, I think you're right. This was specifically for racial and ethnic justice, tying back to the bylaws and then the racial and ethnic disparities that we're seeing. Or Zan, you're shaking your head. What do you want to say?
Well, I think it should be broader than racial and ethnic. I agree. And I think that we need to think in equity terms more, broadly.
Yeah.
There's also, disability, which is also
Mhm.
protected class. So
So maybe
I
just
don't,
cutting that out at the end and just saying, keep at the forefront diversity, equity, and inclusion.
you could say for all protected classes, and it covers everyone, and you don't have to reiterate the whole list.
Except that protected classes vary state to state, which I am learning coming from California.
Well, we're in Oregon.
If we keep diversity, equity, and inclusion in front, then who are we missing? I mean, if you're diverse, if you're equitable and you're inclusive, that means everybody.
I think this is good.
This is Ray. Should we add an additional bullet point that says prioritizing disability, health, and family or something along those lines?
I think it would be worthwhile to have a bullet point that focuses on racial disparity in the experience of people that, or the disparity issues specifically on race for people that are homeless, are experiencing homelessness.
Well, so we also have major disparities with people with disabilities, people fleeing domestic violence.
Is there a way to refer back to the work group presentation and just, I mean, the work group, the one slide I don't mean you have to go back there, but when we had the slide from one of the work groups and they had a list of all of the various discriminatory things that were going on and who's being served, and is there some way that this slide can just reference that? I mean, this covers it all.
Do you mean this one, Carol?
Yes, I mean, this is what we're saying. These are where the issues are. And that I understood that the slide we just looked at was to address these issues or make sure this group was included in what we're doing. And I'm just, instead of trying to list them all out,
we could say what it says on that far left column, which is racial and ethnic and vulnerable.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so the bylaws values, and that had to do with safety, vulnerable populations, and racial and ethnic justice.
You might want to change populations. It'd be population Latinx.
This is Nikki. I was wondering maybe we could get, you said Dr. Aguilar is on the call?
Yeah, Jade, are you still with us? I think she could only
wording or.
Yeah, I think she could only join for the first hour though, so I don't know if Jade's still here.
Okay.
Bummer.
This is Alita, something in your chat. That might
Yeah, Alita has said recognizing identified disparities in our communities.
That's good. I feel like we want to maybe be more specific than just the one line of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So either having the bylaws or what they just said.
Say recognizing the identified disparities identified in our data.
Community data.
Yeah.
Keep at the forefront diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing the identified disparities in our community data, our bylaws, values, safety, vulnerable populations, and racial and ethnic justice.
Cool.
I'm getting thumbs up, seeing
thumbs.
nods. 2 thumbs. Wow, Carol.
Andrea voted twice too.
Reese, did you have something else?
Yeah, if somebody was going to be moved into permanent supportive housing, I would think that the main criteria would be a health disparity. There wouldn't be any, it wouldn't matter what race they were, if they were vulnerable, it would be age, health, and how long they've been in Benton County. So I don't know if any of that should be represented in the bullet points, but because this slide is specifically for permanent supportive housing, I feel like it applies a little differently because of that.
The notion of permanent supportive housing is usually because people they cannot live independently. So it's a mental health, a physical health, intellectual and developmental disability, you name it. So there is a whole suite of factors that play into that. And I think that when we go out into the community, it's a good thing to remember that not everyone understands the term permanent supportive housing. We are going to have to explain how that's used in the housing community.
Yeah.
All right, any last minute tweaks to permanent supportive housing language?
Bylaws value, because it's plural.
Say that again, Lennox.
Bylaws is plural, so it should be value, not values.
Bylaws value.
I know who I'm sending my newsletter articles to.
Yeah, but
Right? I mean, they're amazing.
But
Thank you, Lennox.
linguistics is not grammar. See, linguistics is linguistics. It's not grammar.
It includes grammar.
She's
Grammar's
messing
part
with
of
us. She's messing with us.
Lennox, they are not messing with us, evidently.
They are messing with us. They are messing with us.
We're gonna have a face-off between the librarian and the linguistics masters.
No, she win. They win. They win. They win.
Okay, bylaws value.
Our bylaws value.
Sure. Hope bylaws. How about that?
Yeah, the hope. Yeah. So then
Hope bylaws value safety, vulnerable populations, and racial and ethnic justice. Thank you all for the feedback. I am putting the language here and I'm gonna bring it up so that you can see it a little bit bigger. I will read through it one last time and then we can do a motion to adopt the priority topic areas. Align and strengthen crisis response resources. That's 2 parts. The first part being alignment of services, operational changes for improved care coordination. Coordination between existing providers with street outreach and hub model of care coordination. Hold on, I have to move my little chat box here. Data collection coordinated between providers from entry to transition to permanent options. Increased case managers to support this care coordination from entry, transition, and permanent case management support to remain in housing. Follow-up case management and rental assistance to stay housed in whatever environment works for the individual. Hub model of care coordination. Data tracking coordinated between providers. The other part of our crisis response is location, a safe place to be 24/7 for all populations without housing that respects and addresses the needs of each individual. The third one, transitional options for safety, health, and stability. Current providers are COI, Corvallis Housing First, and Safe Place. Additional examples include micro shelters, Conestoga huts, managed camping, RV and car camping in locations that are safe, sanitary, stable, and provide services for health. 4, permanent supportive housing units. Keep at the forefront diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing identified disparities in our community data, HOPE bylaws value, safety, vulnerable populations, and racial and ethnic justice. Zan.
I have just one comment, and that is that when you go back up to the first section in subsection 1 on aligning services, The second line of the first bullet there is data coordination. And then we have data tracking coordinated between providers. I think that we could move that data line from that first bullet into that fourth bullet instead of having data in there twice. Take the last sentence from that first bullet and just move it down and put it there.
Okay.
Right. Can I make a comment there about you saying, thank you, Zan, for pointing that out. I do know that our providers that they don't all have data, correct? And some of our data collectors aren't providers. Does that make a difference? Or is it just the concept is enough?
I think let's stay in concept mode.
Okay.
Okay, Julie.
Yes.
I'm confused with the very first, under align and strengthen crisis response resources. You say 2 parts, services and location, and you have 1 and 2, and then you go to 3, but is that not supposed to not be a whole nother?
Oh, yeah.
And the same with 4.
So I broke it into 4 priority areas because I think the community feedback on how do we align services and do operational changes for improved care coordination is a whole topic in and of itself with providers. And the location, having a safe place, is another topic in and of itself, but they both fall underneath the aligning and strengthening crisis response resources. Zan, I see you raising your hand.
I'm just thinking that that does create confusion when we see it all in one slide like this. And so I think that when we go out to the community, we could present it differently and say something like strengthen crisis response resources, align services, and then just add that overarching topic to the beginning of each one of those numbers 1 and 2, because location by itself doesn't tell you a lot either. But I don't think we need to mess with that now. I think that that's a communications thing when we go out to talk to people.
Can I just, it's just a really small thing, but there's 2 subtopics to the first one, right? And then you have 3, which should be a new topic, right? So it should be not number 3.
That's what I think.
And number 4, right? You see what I'm saying?
Explain that to me, Lennox.
So you have 1 main topic, align and strengthen, blah, blah, and then you have 1 and 2 under that. But then the next one, transitional options, that's a new topic. So it shouldn't be number 3.
And I'm saying the same thing, but I'm saying it differently. So the first one would be crisis response resources, align services. And the second one would be crisis response resources, central location.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we have 4, and you don't have to do that 2-part stuff up above.
Yeah, well done.
Yay.
Work better?
I'm a geographer.
Well, you know, a geography and a historian can take on a linguistic person.
Yeah, but my first love was actually foreign languages. So, you know, I play both, I bat on both teams.
All right.
Okay, Andrea is saying great. Anita is saying great.
Good.
So I will go ahead and make this bigger. Are there any other changes before someone makes a motion?
I was just going to say it's silly, but your colons and your dashes need to be the same.
You are right, Jan. Thank you. I appreciate
also,
that.
If we're going on that line, the number 3, I think you should capitalize all the main words if these are titles.
Will do.
We'll just be nitpicky about the whole thing just to make it interesting for you, Julie.
That's okay. That's the Corvallis chant, right? And I'm kidding. Okay.
I have a quick wordsmith thing.
Yes, Reese.
Under number 4, the keep at the forefront, diversity, equity, inclusion. It seems like that would be more appropriate under number 2 as a bullet. And then it would be nice if this is the way it's going to the public, if like Zan said, or somebody commented that permanent supportive housing often isn't clear what it is. It seems like there should be some bullet that says prioritize for health need or something of that nature under permanent supportive housing. Or, but it looks good to me, and that was just wordsmithing details.
So I think Peggy made this same feedback, this the forefront and the values, putting that before our priority topic areas, because it really spans all of them. And our data is from all of them. So if you guys are okay with this, I would take those and put them really in the beginning before these. And then have a definition of permanent supportive housing here.
And Julie, this is Barbara. I can't remember who said it earlier, but I thought they did a very good job of defining, Zan, it might have been you, that not everybody is going to be successfully transitioned into, you know, a home that they can maintain. The disabled, the people with chronic mental health issues. And I like what they said, I just can't remember exactly what you said. So if you can remember that and restate it, I think that would be helpful.
I can take a stab at it. At my understanding of permanent supportive housing, and you know, we have an expert here in Andrea Myrie, and others around the table as well, is that it provides housing for people who are otherwise unable to care for themselves or live independently. And so I think for me, when I look at this, provide permanent supportive housing units, often it is specific to certain types of populations. A long-term care facility is permanent supportive housing for an elderly population with disabilities, right? So we're accustomed to that. But there is also permanent supportive housing for people with that are younger, that have disabilities, or that are recovering from substance use disorders or have severe and persistent mental illness. So I think that Julie can probably come up with a good way to describe that. And I wasn't sure whether we wanted to call out the fact that we might want it to be culturally appropriate or appropriate for particular vulnerable populations. But that's something that might also come out in community discussion.
Well, and I can also take the definition from the work group's presentation that was vetted by that work group and came from a specific source, and include that under this permanent supportive housing unit topic. I won't do that right now. But if you all are comfortable with me putting those 2 bullets at the top to articulate our values and prioritization, because it really spans all 4 of these and not hide it under just the 4th one. Okay, thumbs up.
How did you do that?
I think you can do a little emoji in there somewhere, Carol.
Really? I'm gonna look for mine. That's like cool.
If you go to the bottom of the tab bar where the share
Mhm.
screen is, there's a reactions button.
Okay. Oh yeah.
All right, any last minute changes? I see it, Carol, it's there. Oh, simple pleasures. If there are no other additions or changes, then one of you can make a motion and we can vote to adopt these as the priority topics, knowing and articulating that this is where we are starting, not where we are finishing.
I think I heard, was that Carol make the
That was
motion?
George. I'll move
George.
to adopt.
And
this
I
as-
will second Peggy.
George Grosh moves to adopt these 4. Peggy McGuire seconds. All right, since there's been quite a bit of consensus, I don't think I need to go through all of your names. I think I would say any who vote nay, please articulate it. Hearing no nay votes, I'm going to say that this passes with full board support from our board members who are attending today. Good job, all.
Great.
Yes. So the board choices for priority topic areas. We're going to be doing community engagement in November and December. I'd like to have 4 to 6 board members per priority area. And the board member responsibilities would be to engage in outreach and hosting of community feedback sessions with me. I'll be at all of them as well, and helping to coordinate and facilitate them. Reviewing the feedback that we get from community outreach to incorporate it into our policy recommendations, and to do work on drafting of policy recommendations in January and February. So just so we understand the expectations. So I went ahead and thought a little bit before this meeting based on many of your backgrounds, because you guys have expertise in lots of different areas. This is not set in stone. This was just me thinking where some board members might work well. Any of this can be changed, but for I will change these topic headers to have them specifically match the language you just adopted. But the first one would be those aligning crisis response resources. The second one would be strengthening the resources, including location, transitional options, and permanent supportive housing. So go ahead and review that. I left in bold anyone who is not listed up there at the top. Lennox.
Can I add myself to the crisis resources? The first one?
The first one, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And Julie, I have to say, thank you for adding me to that, because I still am thinking, you know, when we had that first meeting and Peggy was telling me how many data systems that she has to enter in data, that's still one of my driving forces. And so, yeah, thank you for adding me to that group.
I recognize a fellow data geek when I see one. I knew you'd want to be there. I'll go ahead and just call on Jan Napak and then Charles Mon to get your feelings on where you'd like to be.
I think the transitional options and permanent supportive housing are those two things having to do with maybe those are the strengths that the city has, and I'd like to make sure I'm on one of those two.
You know, Jan, based on your ward, sorry, your name is not transitional, based on where your ward is, I think it would be appropriate to have you under transitional options. If that's one of your top picks, that would be great.
Okay.
So
Charles?
That was going to be my top pick.
Well, you can be there as well.
And if there's need, I'm also, you know, I'm also interested in the permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
Put him in permanent supportive housing.
Well, we still have George, Christina, and Reese. So first I'll call on Christina. And Christina, I don't think that you can unmute yourself. So maybe I will touch base with you after this meeting. Any luck this time? Okay. Reese, how about you?
Transitional options for me, please.
Okay, then Charles, I am going to move you over.
Yeah, put him over there.
And George.
The first one, first box.
All right, Christina, I'm gonna guess based on your passion that you are just fine being under the strengthening crisis resources location topic. And I think that we are good to go as far as board member placements. Yes, please, you texted, great, thank you. How does everyone feel about these? I haven't heard anything from Linda or Joel, Alita, Flip.
Sounds fine to me.
I'm good at the leader.
I like my group.
Hi, Flip.
All right. Thank you all for that quick work on this. I think that's a pretty good spread of board members. So I'm going to go back over our community feedback options, and I've talked with some of you about this in detail, and for others of you, this will be the first time you're hearing it, and for the general public, probably the first time as well. I am trying to provide as many ways to give community feedback as humanly possible, given that we're living through a pandemic. So there will be meetings that are already in existence, like city council meetings, provider meetings. Hold on, I'm seeing, oh, apologies. I'm seeing something from the chat. TV and radio. Boy, I don't think we have that budget, but wouldn't that be nice? And then doing separate community listening sessions. So for instance, community groups where they do not have the time or the regularly scheduled meeting for me to attend. Let's see here. Could we ask for public service announcement? And can Nikki chime in? Give me just 1 second to get through this, and then I'll open it up for some feedback, Barbara and Nikki, okay? We're going to be putting together surveys. So in the next 2 weeks, I will set meetings for each of those priority areas, and hopefully it will be much easier with only 4, 5, or 6 people to get a meeting on calendar in the next week, week and a half. And we will put together some survey questions for your priority area, because we do not need to open it up to say, you know, tell us everything you want to tell us about this topic. We need to get some feedback that's going to shape policy recommendations. And those surveys will be hosted on the H.O.P.E website. And for some of the pre-existing meetings, for instance, the Philomath City Council meeting or the Corvallis or Monroe City Council meeting, I'll attend for about 10 to 15 minutes to go over these priority areas, explain them, define terms, and say what the purpose of these different surveys are for, and then share a link to the survey for those council members so that the feedback is not given verbally, taking up time from their council meeting. We get their feedback via survey. And then in-person feedback for individuals experiencing homelessness or for other populations that might not be able to attend these other ways or take a survey. I'll be working with service providers to say, what would it look like to interact with your clients and to be able to ask them questions. And some of the preliminary feedback we've gotten is that it would be helpful to just have a 3x5 card in English and in Spanish with sort of top 3 questions on a topic area that would be really important to get feedback from individuals who are currently experiencing homelessness. And then the provider would write on the back responses or check boxes. And so those questions will be shaped by the feedback that we get from providers. I'm gonna go ahead and check the chat here because I saw some, and open it up for comments and questions. Where did the chat go? Barbara first and then Nikki.
Thank you. Yeah, whoever recommended the TV and radio, is it possible that we could ask for a public service announcement time where it's just what they do is because it's part of the public, it's public good?
I'm going to work with our public information officers with the city and the county, now that we have these 4 priority areas, to try to spread the word as much as possible, to put together a little infographic with the appropriate links to share it with community partners who can then retweet it or repost it on their social media outlets, to try to blast it out to all of their networks as well. I do anticipate that there will be some news media coverage, and I think I will ask the executive committee at their meeting in November if they would like to come up with some content to share with news media as far as having coverage of this in different articles.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that comment, Lori. I didn't mean to be dismissive when I said we don't have the budget for a TV news segment. It's a great idea.
So I know that the city of Corvallis puts out a lot of things on a lot of platforms, and I'm not sure they're pulls, they're not pushes. And I don't know, I know that the county has that ability to send out, but you have to sign up for it. So if we could, it's really community awareness that this is going on is what needs to be generated. And I wonder if Patrick Rollins at the city, you'd have to talk to the city manager to see if he could do that. But I know that the county website has blasts that can go out as well.
Yes, and I'm working with both public information officers, both PIOs, Patrick and Alyssa, with the city and the county to make sure that that does happen. And then also one of the things that was at the bottom of that slide that I just took down is that on the H.O.P.E website, I'm going to have a calendar of all the upcoming meetings that are happening. And then below that calendar, a table that lists all of the providers or the different organizations that are being included. Because oftentimes the emails that I get sent are from people saying, well, are you sure, are you including this person? Have you reached out to this person? And this will be a place to point people so that they know all of the different entities who are being involved with this.
Can I chime in?
Please, Nikki, thanks.
I was just going to say, when talking about the PSA, that the university has a radio. I don't know if anyone listens to it. It's called KBVR. I used to be a DJ on it, and they play PSAs. They're required to play PSAs. And I have written several PSAs for them for different organizations that I worked with. So as long as it's not a commercial advertisement, which this is not, then we can submit our own. We can write it, and we can also record it if we want, or we can have one of their staff members record it. And then, that's broadcast out on their radio station.
What a great idea, Nikki. Let's work together offline to come up with that content. One of our public members said the Nextdoor app. I'm going to be working with Tracy Ullman, who works with neighborhood associations for the city of Corvallis to get the word out through different neighborhood associations and on her website. And I'll talk to her about how best to post this on Nextdoor.
Yeah.
Thank you for that idea. Carol?
No, Patrick is already doing all that stuff. So you've got your main people. We don't need to give you every little detail, because between the city and the county, they've got so much covered. You're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and screen share again, just so everybody can be sure to see this. All right, so these are the different ways that we will be doing community feedback. And Lori, I think it was you who asked that question early on. A lot of that outreach that I'm doing is all over Benton County, and that will be posted to the H.O.P.E website once I can do some website updates. But I wanted to just share with you very quickly sort of what it looks like. So this is my spreadsheet, and I've got rural Benton County doing outreach to governments and providers, culturally specific providers. And
Sorry,
then,
Julie, we can't see what you're sharing.
oh, you can't see this. Okay, hold on. Apologies. Thank you for telling me that, Barbara. New share. Yes, I forgot to do the new share. Where are you? Public engagement. Thanks, Barbara.
Sure.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So there are Corvallis providers, and I'll be utilizing an existing monthly meeting of homeless service providers in Corvallis to do some public feedback. There's individuals in Corvallis. There's Corvallis other organizations like the Downtown Corvallis Association, Chamber of Commerce, faith organizations, NAACP, and then rural Benton County governments, providers, culturally specific providers. And so I'm tracking all of this and scheduling it. And I got many of these meetings on calendar even prior to this to try to lay some of the foundation and make sure things were on people's agendas. Andrea is signing off, but thank you so much for joining. Any other questions about the community engagement and outreach before I move on to some updates? Barbara.
Just when I saw that Sarah is on the call, I'm very glad that she's on the call. I just wanted to make sure on your spreadsheet that we have that connection to the schools and the school districts and LBCC and LSU as well.
Do we even have any, I know Peggy is part of the state. Is that our only state contact?
What do you mean, Jan, our only state contact?
You've got a list of entities, tribal and so on. But do we need to liaise with Sarah or Dan Rayfield or anybody? Do we have anybody at the state level that needs to chime in?
I want to say that Peggy's not part of the state. Community Services Consortium is an intergovernmental county level entity. But aside from that, I do think it's a good idea to brief both Senator Gelser and Representative Rayfield. And we've just recently been working on some permanent supportive housing options kind of off to the side here. And we need to talk to them early and often. So that's a great idea, Jan.
Okay.
And the other contact at the state, well, it's a state service really, is DHS, Department of Health Services. And I'm in contact with Misha Mayers, who is more of our local designee for DHS. And their location is right across the street from the Sunset Building. And Misha routinely attends our monthly service provider meeting to give updates. And so she will be looped in on this. And she's a state representative, although not in a legislative capacity.
Did you
She's on the call, isn't she?
I'm listening right now.
Oh, are
Yes.
you here, Misha? I'm talking
am.
about
Hello.
you. Your ears must be burning. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Hi, Julie.
Did you have Lynn Benton Housing Authority on that?
Yes, although Donna's bandwidth is limited, so I'm trying to find another
Okay.
individual at
Just
LBH
checking.
who can
Yep.
attend.
So
Hold on just a second, Jan. Charles wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have you given thought about presenting to the Housing Stability Council of Oregon?
I have not. I thought that was
Very
a bit above me, but I will get your feedback on that. And
Well,
yeah,
I
Zan?
think for any one individual from this group, I think you're the staff, you're the you're the hub, so to speak, of all the connected folks. And I think it'd be good for them to be aware of the work that we're trying to do, because later we might be wanting to ask them for money.
So if I could just make a quick comment about that, Charles, they usually have their agenda items set like 6 to 8 months in advance. It's very difficult to get on the agenda. So Julie, if you wanted to make some sort of comment, you would have to do it at a public, in the public comment period, and just give like a brief whatever presentation for, I think you get 2 minutes or something.
Right, that's what I'm thinking of, just to let them know we exist.
Okay, Charles, I'll
yeah.
follow up with you afterward about the logistics of that.
And Julie, one of our governing board members at CSC is the chair of the Housing Stability Council.
Okay, I'll follow up with Charles and Peggy about how best to utilize that forum. Anita, do you want to chime in?
I'm just happy to get surveys out to any Samaritan staff, ED doctors in particular, and some of our residents at the clinic see quite a few of the unhoused. Happy to get their feedback if you'd like.
Thank you for that. Jan, did you have another thing you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Charles, were you talking about the Oregon Coalition of Housing and Homelessness? Is that what you said?
The Housing Stability Council.
It's called the Housing Stability Council. They meet the first Friday of every month.
Okay. Do we have a statewide coalition for any of what we're doing? Similar? Oh, good. And we're connected to them. Okay, thanks.
I would not say that I am connected to them, but it does exist. So maybe I can follow up with the executive committee on some of these other more state level outreach
Julie,
strategies.
CSC is connected with them. We can help.
Okay, great.
Julie?
Yes.
There's a lot of good ideas on connecting with groups that already have some nexus to this topic. Are we going to make sure that we're reaching out to sort of other community groups and other forums that don't have a nexus to make sure we're getting that input as well?
Do you mean beyond neighborhood associations, Chamber of Commerce, DCA? What are you thinking of, Joel?
Just other groups like, civic groups like Lions Club or Elks, or, there's a lot of folks in the community that don't have a direct nexus to this topic that I want to make sure we're not overlooking that input as well. Because obviously the folks on the call have all those connections already so that those are easy to establish. So
Joel, are you talking about like the downtown association, DCA?
as an example, yes.
Okay.
And DCA, I'm well connected to, and so is Christina. But Joel, these are great ideas. And I think when we meet in the next 2 weeks with the smaller topic areas, I'm going to go over all the outreach and make sure that we're not missing anything. And then I will ask you as board members to help do some of that outreach. If you have existing connections with libraries or Lions Club or Elks Club, to reach out and say, would you like, Julie and another board member to attend and go over this topic? So that's a great idea.
And I want to say something. The other part of what Andrea said in her note, she said, happy to get feedback from individuals when we are doing sort and surveying residents. So that goes with Anita's.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to go over that with service providers in 2 weeks at their monthly meeting. And the other thing Andrea talked about was this upcoming week. And so I'll follow up with her about trying to publicize it that way. Thank you all for the great feedback. Let's see, there's one more chat here. Oh, libraries. Thank you, Nikki. I wrote that down. I'm going to go ahead and screen share to give you an update. This was something that was asked about by many people, and a couple of updates that came in very recently that I wanted to share with you all to make sure you're in the know. Benton County Health Department has finally filled the vacancy for an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, a mental health practitioner to serve Alsea and Monroe clinics. And she'll be starting in January. And that has been a vacancy that's been really difficult to fill. So starting in a couple of months, we'll have an LCSW going between the Alsea and Monroe health clinics to serve those areas. Great news. The other one is drug treatment court, and the oversight and responsibility for drug treatment court is going to be transitioning to the Benton County Health Department starting in January. And I'm sure Joel has worked on this extensively, and our health department has to, Danielle Brown in particular, to take over responsibility for drug treatment court. And so that's a wonderful.
Can I jump in there, Julie?
Yeah, Zan, please.
We're not taking over the oversight of drug treatment court. That's staying with OJD and
apologies
the courts. What's transitioning is the mental health and the substance use disorder treatment component that will come back to the health department to provide. And so we'll be working hand in glove with our state colleagues at the Oregon Justice Department.
Thank you for clarifying that, Zan. I did not say that articulately at all. I appreciate that. The other update is about camping in Corvallis, which is something I know everybody has been very focused on because of how cold it's getting and the urgency of the need. And so this update comes from city staff. So I'll go ahead and read it. City Council voted in October to delay implementation of the proposed phased camping enforcement. The city has funded construction of 15 micro shelters. They're ongoing and being built now, but they're not yet available. The county funded 2 full-time case managers for Unity Shelter to help with the screening, support, and transition for more individuals in and out of micro shelters. Allison, Sean, and Andrea have worked with city staff to provide feedback on that first draft of the proposed enforcement plan. No one should yet have been asked to move at this time. So if anyone sees cleanup activities occurring, that is abandoned materials and not active campsites. And the city attorney has said that he has examined all the possible legal angles for establishing a managed camp on city park land, including on a temporary basis or through emergency powers, and concluded that the charter language does not have any loopholes that would allow a managed camp without a vote of the community. I know that a lot of people have feelings about that last bullet point, but that is the update. And if there's any discussion about this topic or questions, we can go ahead and discuss that now. I think that is my last slide before our next steps. Or any other updates, because I see Sean on the phone and Joel's on the phone. Has anything changed in the last week since I got that update?
Before you go there, can I go back to your last question? I respect the city attorney's opinion. I'm gonna put on the record. That's his opinion. And the council has the power to do as they choose. And there's already camping that's occurring in the park. The simple thing is they could enact it or they could choose to go to a vote. But either way, they're gonna need land for camp. They're gonna need a space for camping sometime. They're gonna run into it. We need to start coming to grips with the fact that they're gonna have to have that discussion sooner or later.
One of the things that, the city doesn't really have a whole lot of opportunities for camping or shelters or what have you. And if you look at what is available in the county or in the urban growth boundary area, I think we have a better chance of finding a spot out there. I know the whole community needs to be involved here, but we can't keep we cannot keep concentrating and putting the camps and other things in just certain areas of the city. It needs to be all over, and I think it needs to be in the county as well. It needs to be a shared responsibility, and I'd like to see where every Benton County resident has a role to play, and not have it just fall on Corvallis. Corvallis has strengths for getting affordable housing and making sure that we have enough housing, and those are city strengths. So it's kind of, it's a balancing act, and it's kind of a dynamic here that we have to be sure that when you say the city council can vote to change a park designation, I don't, that would take probably a couple of years to get, to even approach that. So let's try to be creative. Maybe we can look at further out.
Jan, I think what George was referring to is we actually have the power, if we wanted to temporarily designate a park for other use, as long as it doesn't violate the park's intended use. I kind of agree with George. I don't fully agree with the city attorney. I respect his opinion, but he's taking it very literally. And I think if you read it from a different point of view, what is a park? I mean, people camp in parks just naturally, right? They camp in state parks, they camp in other parks. So you could temporarily designate a park if we wanted to. Yeah, I mean, there's always the threat of litigation. I think every group anywhere faces that anytime they make any decisions. But if we wanted to, and the council as a whole wanted to, we could. But I don't know if the council would agree with that at this time, but who knows?
Well, and I'll bring it back to, are there any other updates on this topic? Linda?
Just reiterate, there are really great models out there of managed camping that is put together rather quickly. And it does require a combination of city and services, other services. So that's what you're discussing, but those are the models that work.
And Linda, I think that'll be important to share as part of the public feedback on that topic. What are successful models of transitional options that have been successful elsewhere that we might want to adopt here? What do they have to be successful? So.
Well, I do think though whatever models we put in place, there's going to be a time lag. And I think what I'm hearing about, and I understand the issue with the parks, and if there's managed camping in the parks, I can tell you 5 people who are going to file a suit tomorrow. But we don't have a place for people, and we keep talking about we're going to post the parks, and whether it's posted 2 months from now, there's still no place for anybody to go. And I don't think our plan is going to get into place yet in time to provide a place. So it seems like the city and the county, but I'm a city in the city, so I'd say that the city council doesn't need to see this as an emergency situation and figure out how to manage it versus just saying we're going to post and then people are going to go all over totally unmanaged. It seems crazy to me that the council doesn't want to shape this in a way instead of just letting it happen. And
Well, I'm going to, oh,
we don't need to talk about it now. I just think that our plan though won't get into the stuff that we're proposing isn't going to happen right away.
no, I think we need to be, sorry, Reese. I have a long list of church properties, a very long list of church properties, and a list of private properties that if with a little nudging, maybe they would, do something about this, but it doesn't have to be on a park.
No, but there has to be a plan now. And there is no plan. There has to be a plan that says if we're going to post Mary's River and say we've got to have, say, if you're moving from there, here are your options. And we don't have any options. We're just moving people out. There's no place to put them. And I think that's not a responsible path to take.
I understand that. And we, if we can register folks and they can have a 12 by 12 area in a park and it's cordoned off and they're registered and they follow code of conduct and we have it fenced and we have it managed and we have somebody to manage it, then we can do it. But I don't think we can just say, okay, we're gonna designate a park.
I don't know. I'm kind of.
Well, and I think we're getting in the weeds here.
Yeah, we're getting in the weeds.
And I think
So that's a bad pun.
For sure.
if city council wants to explore other options on this, you can, but this is not a city council meeting. Reese, go ahead.
Just a quick comment on something that might help spur the council's movement would be getting statistics. I don't know exactly where to get this, but I heard at least 2 people in the local homeless community were checked into the hospital because they were too cold, hypothermia, and there might be more than the 2, but if you got those specific statistics and presented them to city council, because there really is people out there who are suffering from the weather already. And I feel like that would help. And maybe if we realize nothing's going to happen soon enough, then the council needs to, or people should be making an effort to provide blankets, hand warmers, buddy heaters, tents, that kind of thing, just in the meantime.
And conversations around warming tents are happening between providers in city and county. But I'll again reiterate the goal and the purpose of this board to do policy recommendations for the city and the county for long-term planning. And this is an important topic and it's going to be embedded in the work that we do. But the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen next week needs to happen in a different forum.
Oh.
No, sorry, Carol. You're not muted. Any other community updates that this board should be apprised of in line with the ones that I gave? Peggy in the chat is reminding this group about the Ninth Circuit ruling. Everyone go ahead and vote. Just a civic reminder. The last thing I'll do is to go over next steps. And that is what's going to happen in the next 2 months. Our priority topic groups are going to meet in the next 2 weeks. Tomorrow, I'm going to get in touch with your smaller groups via email to get something on calendar in the next week, max 2 weeks, to put together some survey questions on your topic. And they're going to be designed to help the Hope Board formulate policy recommendations for the city and the county on those topics. We'll do our community engagement for the next 2 months, draft policy recommendations to incorporate that feedback in January and February. And the goal, it's lofty, but we're going to go for it, is to deliver the preliminary policy recommendations by March for budget decisions for both of these local governments. And just again, I will say that the priority topics are where we're starting as a board, not where we're ending, because we can't fix the whole spectrum at once. So this is where we're going to start. And that there's any questions from members of the public, you can always go to the HOPE website. You can email me directly. And all of the PowerPoints from previous meetings are also hosted there. Any other questions about what we're doing? Flip, go for it.
How long is the scope of HOPE? How long will we continue?
Well, advisory boards go infinitely. You can have advisory boards on a specific topic. Zan's laughing. She's hoping no. That can last for years. I think that the scope and the purpose of an advisory board like this can change over time as things develop and proposals get adopted. And I think our scope as well can turn more towards advocacy and education once we have a plan that's been adopted by the city and the county. But I don't think that anytime in the near future, in the next couple of years, this board will be moot.
Okay.
Zan, did you want to chime in on that?
I think that it'll last as long as there's a need for it. As Julie says, that's a pretty good response. And I concur that we definitely will be around for the next 2 to 5 years.
How are you all feeling about where we are in the process? I, for one, as your coordinator, am really proud of all the work you've done, given that we had to take a 4-month hiatus and it's all virtual. I think you've been data-driven. I think you've been doing work that has been dictated by the bylaws, that we've arrived at priority areas that I'm comfortable with, and that we're moving as fast as we can. How do you all feel? I see thumbs up from Reese, Flip, Zan, Lennox, Nikki, Linda, Alita, George, Peggy, Carol.
I'd say I like the work we're doing. I just always get frustrated with how long things always take.
Yes.
Welcome to the club.
Long-term policy and planning and recommendations that change budget decisions, they have to take enough time to be grounded in data and community feedback, and that's what you all are doing. I'm proud to be a part of it.
I would just say that based on where we've been with HOAC in the past and the first iteration of HOPE, that we're moving at lightning speed.
Yeah, isn't this our like 1-year anniversary? Didn't we start last October?
I just had my year review a week ago. It's not even been a year. The board members were picked in November. You met for the first time in December. And so, no, you haven't been together for a year, and you had to take 4 months off because of a worldwide pandemic. So good work.
Right. But we're moving very quickly, which is good.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for everyone from the public who chimed in to listen on this call. And you'll be hearing more from this group in a wide variety of ways with community engagement. Please feel free to email me with any follow-up. And thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you
Bye.
very
Paula, are you still on? Do you have everything you need for note-taking?
Yep, I've got it. And then you recorded it, right? So I can always fill in. So.
Yep, it's recording, and I will get that downloaded onto the server tomorrow. It takes a couple of hours to download, but I'll let you know once it's there.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Yeah,
great meeting. Very productive.
Okay, bye-bye.
You take care.
You too.